Welcome. This is Beyond the Bridges, a Christian outreach to Indiana ex-offenders, helping you find your way home. This is David Richardson, your host, bringing you the podcast version of Beyond the Bridges newsletter, Watchmen on the Bridge, for May of 2016, Volume 2, Issue 3. Our first story. Background checks are self-explanatory, right? Ex-offenders know that employers use background checks to evaluate applicants. It is standard procedure. They also know that when employers see a felony conviction, they quite often will not offer a job. The felony may be 10 to 15 years old and without a subsequent conviction, but an employer will have the same objection as if the conviction had been recent. If the ex-offender is truthful, interviewers may not say a word about the objection to hiring an ex-felon. They just will not give a call back. It makes looking for a job frustrating and depressing. The problem here, of course, is the well-respected HR adage, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Consequently, an applicant who has proved untrustworthy in the past, say by a robbery or assault, will probably prove untrustworthy in the future. To hire that person is a risk, one that might result in injury to staff or to customers. That creates issues of liability. Thinking about this gives the interviewer a headache. What is the cure? Forget this applicant, get on with the next, and hope that the next background check shows no police record. That would be more like it. This is why learning how to give a persuasive explanation of conviction is so important. Ex-offenders must persuade the employer that they have changed their lives, that they are no longer the same people who merited a felony conviction. Beyond the Bridges has training on how to do this, and an ex-offender would find it useful. But there is another issue here, an issue that no one ever questions. An applicant may have had several years of untroubled history. That does not seem to count, as if the felony conviction will eventually sweep away any record of good behavior and turn the applicant suddenly into a dangerous criminal. It's just a matter of time. Most people assume somehow that this is reasonable, that the employer has every right to look at a past felony as predictive. An applicant with a conviction will always prove a more risky employment choice than an applicant without a record. Were the same principle, however, applied to other past behavior, no one would regard it as rational. People spend a good portion of their lives unable to walk or speak effectively. By the time they interview for a job, however, they have mastered these skills. But should an employer conclude that their past inability to speak or to walk might suddenly interfere with their ability to do the job, that would be crazy. Should an interviewer regard that possibility as a legitimate reason to deny employment, then that would be legally actionable. Typically, after the passage of time, walking and talking become skills that simply will not disappear suddenly without a medical explanation. Could this also be true of criminal convictions? At what point does the passage of time make an ex-offender's probability of reoffense the same as that of anyone drawn from the general population? Take the offense of robbery, for example. If after 7.5 years, suppose an ex-offender's risk of committing that crime becomes statistically the same as the risk for an applicant who has no criminal record, without any additional offenses during this period, then how much weight should an employer place upon that ex-offender's record? In fact, should the employer even have access to that criminal record? This is not idle speculation. In 2009, a study funded by the Justice Department and carried out by investigators from the Carnegie Mellon University explored this issue. Researchers reviewed 88,000 arrest cases in New York State. They focused on burglaries, robberies, and batteries. The length of crime-free time from the initial infraction they discovered, affected a perpetrator's probability of reoffense. For an 18-year-old, for example, the passage of 7.5 crime-free years reduced the likelihood of risk to an employer to that of a felony-free job candidate drawn from the public. The periods of time varied given the crime and the onset of criminal activity. What does this study suggest? Simply this: the unquestioned and routine use of background checks to disqualify ex-offenders from job opportunities may be unjustified statistically and socially prejudicial. The same challenge might be made of the way they are used to evaluate the work and training histories of felony-free applicants. The findings of the 2009 study are preliminary, but the scientific literature on this topic remains thin. The 2009 study was followed by another in 2011, but such scant research is curious because background checks have become so widespread in hiring evaluations. It would appear that if the raw data accumulated by these checks requires greater sophistication to evaluate than the typical human resource department possesses, then studies should be underway to determine more scientifically how the data collected by these background checks should be accurately interpreted. Failing to do this will give interviewers a false sense of objectivity as they look at background check results. They will believe that they are interpreting facts. In reality, however, they are interpreting the equivalent of an ink blot test. They will simply read their own stereotypes into the report. Inmates and Cats at Pendleton Corrections. What happens when a prison puts inmates and cats together? No, the facility does not go to the dogs. Instead, the animals and humans change one another's lives for the better. And that is the purpose of this innovative Indiana Department of Corrections initiative. The Pendleton Correctional Facility now pioneers a program to help inmates reconnect to their compassion and empathy. It is called Forward. That means felines and offenders rehabilitation with affection, reformation, and dedication. That is a mouthful, but inmates say that they look forward to their 9-hour shifts, during which they tend to the needs of about a dozen cats, rescue animals the prison has brought in from local shelters. This is a big improvement for both the animals and the inmates. At the shelters, the cats live mostly in cages. At the prison, they have the run of a newly renovated open space. Cats learn to socialize with other cats and with people. That makes them more adoptable. In addition, the space is equipped with special walkways, cat trees, and scratching posts, all created by the inmates. Moreover, the cats have access to medical treatment. The program started in March of last year and is funded through donations. Michelle Rains, Forward's representative, says inmates volunteer for cat duty. Moreover, she interviews each volunteer to assure suitability for the job. Just by listening to the inmates, it's clear that the presence of a dozen or so needy cats has affected the prison's population dramatically. One inmate commented that the program gives me a reason to strive to do better than I did yesterday. Other inmates, given responsibility for an animal, have openly admitted that the experience allowed them, for the first time in their memory, to care for something, to love something. Recidivism is a major problem in all 50 states. Could part of the answer to that problem lie in a kitten's purr or a gentle nuzzle to the hand? If so, that would exemplify scriptural wisdom, the weak and foolish things of the world confounding the strong and wise. So as Pendleton awaits evidence-based results to evaluate the program, the community will nurture the effort with faith and hope, and with additional donations from loving people. Speed definition. What is recidivism? Recidivism is the act of relapsing into a problem or criminal behavior during or after receiving sanctions, or while undergoing an intervention due to a previous behavior or crime. In criminal justice settings, recidivism is often measured by criminal acts that result in rearrest, reconviction, or return to prison. Final thoughts. What Missouri can teach Indiana about older inmate care. The inmate population in Indiana and around the country reflects the national census. America is getting older. In 2012, the Human Rights Watch published a report, Old Behind Bars, the Aging Prison Population in the United States. The report noted that the percentage of inmates 55 or older in the state and federal prisons was surging. According to Law Street, a web-based legal journal, experts predict that by 2030, nearly 1 in 3 inmates will be 55 or older. The Human Rights Watch summarized the problem in this way. Prisons in the United States contain an ever-growing number of aging men and women who cannot readily climb stairs, haul themselves to the top bunk, or walk long distances to meals or the pill line, whose old bones suffer from thin mattresses and winter's cold, who need wheelchairs, walkers, canes, and portable oxygen and hearing aids, who cannot get dressed, go to the bathroom, or bathe without help, and who are incontinent, forgetful, suffering chronic illnesses, extremely ill, and dying. Just as other state prison systems, Indiana's will see an ever-increasing number of inmates requiring mobility assistance, dementia symptoms management, heart and cancer treatment, and end-of-life care. Whether prison officials want to deal with it or not, a costly wave of inmate medical care is coming, a wave that will force prisons to change significantly the way they operate. Fortunately, a state nearby may have come up with some answers that Indiana could use. That state is Missouri, the Show Me State, and they have something to show Indiana. Following recommendations from a special 2009 advisory report on caring for older inmates, it has developed a system of enhanced care facilities in its prisons, facilities equipped to handle the needs of aging prisoners, providing elderly inmates with a mobility-friendly environment, personal care, range of motion exercises, and special medical treatment. These facilities offer more open space, employ handrails generously to assist older inmates to walk, have side-by-side beds rather than bunks, provide daily medical staff contact, and use screened and medically trained inmates who can serve as volunteer caregivers. The use of trained inmate volunteers augments the medical staff and provides 24-hour monitoring for elder inmates suffering from serious illnesses. The state provides these volunteers with the technical medical training required in a special program that empowers inmates to take care of one another. This solution, however, is not easy. Following closely the recommendations from the 2009 advisory report, Missouri prepared for the future. From that time until now, it has built enhanced care facilities in 5 of its prisons. The state also plans to create a special prison exclusively dedicated to caring for older inmates. As Indiana's inmates manifest symptoms of degenerative illness, such as heart disease and Alzheimer's, nursing home and hospice care will come to the penitentiary. It's inevitable. Because of early planning, Missouri is ahead of the curve. For Indiana, the time to start planning was yesterday. The Indiana Department of Corrections simply cannot make the system ready overnight. The solution must fit together a number of complicated pieces. Implementation will require leadership, sufficient funds, and time. And it probably will not prove popular politically. So planning should get started now. The Human Rights Watch correctly identifies the care of elder inmates as a human rights issue. Federal courts concur. Incarceration does not permit a prison to allow an inmate to suffer or die from neglect. Refusal to provide proper care would classify as cruel and unusual punishment. This is a constitutional violation, and federal courts have held prison systems accountable, demanding that prison administrators provide proper medical care. A graying prison population may create challenges for Indiana officials to meet this responsibility, but that will not serve as a legal defense for violating an inmate's civil rights. The courts will not relax the demand for proper medical care simply because inmates have become old and infirm. So Indiana must rise to the occasion and find solutions. Thank you for listening to the podcast version of the Beyond the Bridges newsletter, Watchmen on the Bridge. Beyond the Bridges meets the first Saturday of every month from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the North United Methodist Church, 3808 North Meridian Street, and you're invited. We share breakfast, experiences, concerns, and we also provide training and information on various subjects. We'd like to see you there, and please look at our website, beyondthebridges.org. And thank you again for listening to the podcast version of Watchmen on the Bridge. Until next time, this is David Richardson, your host, saying, may God richly bless you.